Okay, Aaron, if you can just keep an eye on that live stream. If we're back, just let us know.
We're back.
All right, we are back. Next up, the plan update background paper, Village Core Zone. Debbie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So keeping of poultry roosters, or Village Core, sorry.
Yeah, we got roosters here.
Wrong one.
That's okay. Score zone.
Village cores. So this background report proposes updates to the Village Core VC designation and zone provisions. Current Village Core policies and regulations lead to good design, such as the East Hants Animal Hospital. However, in continuing the municipality's efforts to make the village cores more pedestrian friendly and listening to feedback from developers and our residents, staff feel that further refinement of the regulations are required. Proposed amendments are either housekeeping or relatively minor in nature. Council's purpose for developing the Village Core VC zone is to allow for a diverse mixture of retail, service, business, and residential uses in an environment serving both pedestrian and vehicle needs within an aesthetically pleasing, socially interactive streetscape, serving both the local and community-wide population. So I have a variety of topics that I'm going to hit on. So the first one is ground floor commercial uses. Residential buildings in the Village Core zone may have ground floor commercial uses as of right, but it's not mandatory. And in order to allow for those ground floor commercial uses, we require higher ceiling heights and main entrances that face the street and larger windows. The current regulations require that ground floors have to be designed so they meet they can be converted. And based on recent comments regarding the lack of available commercial space in the corridor, staff are now recommending that the Village Core VC zone residential properties that have frontage on a collector road and are not located on a flag lot have the option to increase the overall gross floor area of their building if they have a ground floor commercial beyond an office or for an apartment building. So for an example, currently the maximum gross floor area that a building in the Village Core zone can be is 835 meters squared before a development agreement is required. And that's for a multi-tenant or a multi-residential building. However, if the property owner adds a ground floor commercial use, the floor area before a development agreement is required to be 1,020 meters squared. So therefore, we're giving a bonus if they put in a ground floor commercial use of 185 meters squared. In addition to this, we're also proposing that buildings that have the entire ground floor as commercial use be allowed to have between 1 and 12 dwelling units on the above floors. An example of this is Cup of Soul, and that text was missed during the 2016. It doesn't say they can't do it. It's just not clear that it says that they can do it. So there's two different things there. One is kind of like a bonus. If you put a commercial premises on the bottom floor of a multi-tenant building, then you can have above 835 meters squared, that extra 185 meters squared. And the other one is if you have a complete ground floor that is commercial, then you can have more than, you can have a unit or 2 units above that commercial floor use. The next topic is maximum commercial floor area for a single-use building. So economic and business development staff have suggested that 230 meters squared is too small of a footprint for a single-use commercial building prior to a development agreement being required. Therefore, staff are recommending that the maximum size of a single-use commercial building should be 400 meters squared, and any single-use building above this commercial floor area would have to be considered by development agreement. So that just gives property owners in the Village Cores a little bit more flexibility over the size of their single-use commercial developments. Conversion of a commercial building to a single or 2-unit dwelling. So right now, the Village Core zone provisions allow for the conversion of a single and 2-unit dwellings to commercial uses. However, those provisions don't allow for the commercial use to be converted back to a dwelling. So staff are therefore proposing that these uses can be converted back to a single or 2-unit dwelling. So an example of this is in Enfield Fergie's hair salon there. That building was originally a house. It was converted to a hair salon. And then, so now that they want to convert it back to the house, but our regulations don't allow for that to occur. So this would just allowing those houses that were converted to be converted back to a house. Minimum street facing facade transparency is the next topic. So street facing facade transparency refers to the degree to which people can see what lies beyond the edge of the street. A typical example of transparency is a large shop front window that allows pedestrians to see into the store, so it allows more visibility. According to research that I've done, to create walkable mixed-use neighborhoods, areas should have between 50 and 90% transparency on the front facade, so that's the facade facing the street. This creates a sense of eyes on the street and a perception of human activity. However, based on comments received from some developers indicating that the current street-facing transparency requirements are too onerous, so our current transparency requirements are 60% on the street-facing facade transparency. So staff proposed reducing the current minimum street-facing transparency from 60% to 50%. So we're still within that range, but we're just reducing it by 10% to make it a little bit easier. Planning staff do not recommend that the transparency is reduced any further, or the purpose of having the transparency to create an active streetscape will be eroded. So the whole idea is to have those active street faces on your Highway 2 and your Highway 214 and Highway 1 to make it feel as if it's an active streetscape. We don't want blank walls along there. So our next topic is historical preservation incentive. So our village cores are home to some of East Hans's oldest buildings. Current village core zone regulations already encourage the preservation of historic buildings by not applying the form-based zone requirements to these buildings where the goal of the renovations to restore the building or site to its original design. So for an example like this, like if another home such as Cup of Soul were to be renovated, they wouldn't have to go through the site plan approval process because again, you're taking an older home, it has historical importance and you're renovating it to restore it to its some of its historical relevance to the community. So in those cases, you would need site plan approval. In spite of this provision, the Elmsdale Village Core is still losing its older homes. Therefore, staff would like to add further incentive to the Village Core zone by encouraging developers to maintain the historic buildings by not counting the gross floor area of the historic buildings towards the overall gross floor area of the entire development. And an example of this is that we have some of those homes on Highway 214, some of those older homes that are turn of the century homes. So it would be encouraged developers who buy those homes to maintain those historic residents and then allow them to develop in the back of those lots where there's larger lots. So we maintain the historic home, allow for development on the back of those lots and not count the gross floor area of those homes towards the overall gross floor area of their development. And we do have some proposed text there. And that would be the heritage coordinator that determines the historical relevance of the home. So it'd be in her decision capacity. It wouldn't be up to the developer whether they determined the home to be historic or not. Next topic is village core signage. Staff are proposing amendments to the village core signage provisions based on the results of the FBM study that was completed to Highway 214 for the Highway 214. Amendments proposed to reduce the size of ground signs to make them pedestrian friendly. Currently, property owners are permitted to have awning signs, facial wall signs, projecting wall signs, sandwich board signs, and ground signs. And the study recommends that more of these signs are actually encouraged as compared to the ground signs. Staff are recommending that the signage area of the ground sign be reduced to become more pedestrian friendly. And by reducing the ground sign area regulations in the village core, staff are hoping that more businesses will take advantage of the other types of signs. And that's what as I said, what the study recommends. Time limits. So this is the next subject. And the time limits actually will apply to not just the village core zones, but anybody that uses, any zone that uses site plan approval in it. So in any zone, once site plan approval has been granted by the development officer, there is no limit to the amount of time in which an approval is valid for. Therefore, staff are recommending that there be a 2-year time limit for which approved site plans are valid if construction has not been initiated. Once the 2-year period has ended, the property owner would have to make a new site plan approval application and conform with any new regulations. So as I said, right now, we have no time limits on our site plan approval. And the MGA doesn't call it out within the text of the MGA as in the same manner as it does for development agreements. But we've confirmed with the solicitor that we can add it to our land use bylaw and indicate that there's a 2-year period on those. Buffering. So the next subject will be buffering. Under the current regulations, buffering is not required around village core zone uses, which is due to the compact nature of the village core zone. However, staff have received feedback from adjacent residential zone uses and property owners indicating concerns with the lack of buffering for their residential properties. Therefore, staff are recommending that an opaque buffer be required along the property lines that are shared with residential zone uses. And so therefore, we're recommending that a new requirement be put in place to buffer those residential zone uses with the village core zone uses. In conclusion, additional housekeeping amendments are included in the staff report, and most of it has to do with a clarification of text, repeating of items, and one of them has to do with street trees in regards to the FBM study. If the municipality is going to put street trees along the 214, then there's no need for the street trees fronting along some of those properties. That's required as part of the form-based zone requirements. So it's just reducing some of the repetitiveness in our requirements. So we're recommending a variety of housekeeping and minor amendments. A refinement of the policies and regulations will ensure better design of our village cores and better interpretation of our planning documents. Planning staff feel that the proposed changes to the village core zone provisions will improve upon the current regulations. And the recommendation is that Planning Advisory Committee recommend the council authorize staff to draft proposed amendments to the official community plan in regards to changes to the village core VC zone as presented at today's meeting and outlined in the staff report. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Debbie. Councillor Tingley, did you have your hand up to speak?
No, I didn't. No.
Okay. Warden Rolston.
Thank you. Just a question on the bonus square footage item for commercial. Is there any concern or protection that, or is it even needed, I guess, if someone took advantage of that bonus and developed something and then couldn't rent it commercially to just flip it and now have a larger residential area instead? Or would the larger residential area have been permitted anyway?
Through Mr. Chair, in our regulations, you're allowed to have between 8 and 12 dwelling units in the village core zone. So if you have a commercial, if you're getting that bonus of that extra area, and that goes up to 835 meters squared. So if you have a bonus of that extra area and you're using that bonus, so you go up to your 1,000, then we would require you to maintain that commercial area in order to maintain the larger size of your building.
So what happens if they can't rent the commercial area? It just sits there empty?
Then they'd have to come back to council with a development agreement allowing them to have it changed to a residential use.
So they could do that?
Yes.
Okay. And the between 1 and 12 units above the commercial floor area,
Yes.
there must be some regulation determining whether it can be 1 or 12 in any specific situation.
So under our current regulations, in the village core, you're allowed to have between 8 and 12 dwelling units as of right through site plan approval, up to a maximum of 835 meters squared. So it was never intended that you're not allowed to have above ground commercial uses. So you can have a mixed use building where you could have your commercial on the bottom that takes up 5,000 square feet, for example, and then you wanted to have, or 500 meters squared, and then you wanted to have the additional 300 meters squared above the commercial. but it doesn't meet the maximum of 8 dwelling units. So therefore you could have like 2 or 3 dwelling units above the commercial use and still be within that box of 835 meters squared. It's a little confusing, I'd
Yeah.
admit.
What is the height restriction?
The height restriction, so it, as of right, it's 2.5 stories, unless you're integrating the design into the roof, and you can only do that through like a mansard or a gramble roof, so that you could do a 3rd story, but it has to be integrated into the roof. So it has to look like the roof's coming around. It can't be like a roof on top of that 3rd story. It has to be built right into the roof system.
Okay, thank you.
Jordan, Councillor Garden Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of things that I'm liking about this, and that's encouraging the older buildings to be incorporated into anything that might be coming along. And secondly, the buffer. And I know that was something that came up with the proposed development on Bakery Lane and Enfield, and the
Yes.
residents that are going to be backing on it. And I suppose it's too late for that to be enacted with that particular development, but at least it will be going forward. So I'm pleased to see that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Musa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Are those changes only to the corridor area or Mount Uniacke too,
Through Mr. Chair, to the Mount Uniacke Village Core as well.
as well? So I always have a question about village core. How you determine where is the village core of a town, a small town? How you how you guys design it? Like what you look at? I don't know.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Musa, do you mean the area that's incorporated into the
Yes.
village core?
Yes.
So right now that area is already designated and zoned as village core, and during the I think it was already zoned village core prior to the 2016 plan review. So it's been zoned village core in Mount Uniacke for a while, and it would have been initially determined that that seems to be more or less where the most activity in that general Mount Uniacke area takes place, because you have, for example, the gas station, the seniors manor there, the fire department, the Tim Hortons. I think there's also a Guardian there as well. So it's more of the activity, the center of Mount Uniacke, where more activity, commercial activity takes place.
Well, I kind of don't agree with that, because like I think the more area will be closer to the exit where everybody's going to town. If you need to add more commercial and more like residential in an area, like if you want to put the daycare, you want to put something close to the exit where everybody's going, drop their kids and go. Nobody wants to go back all the way to the edge of the rural area of Mount Uniacke. Then like I think the whole Highway 1 should be like from the Irving to the ESO should be all. We're growing very fast, and soon we're gonna be needing a lot of commercial spaces and a lot of apartment for like to be integrated into like a multi-unit apartment, and where we designated now, it's mostly taken by like Bell Park or whatever, the school, the library, the open space, and Uniacke House, and the rest is all small houses. So you're not going to be able to do it. And to buy all those houses to put one bigger apartment, it's not going to be any.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the more regional commercial stuff, the larger commercial stuff, as you're referring to, that you want out by the interchange area, that's actually already zoned regional commercial out there. So that it already allows for those larger commercial uses, for those apartment buildings and stuff like that. The village core isn't intended for those larger apartment buildings or commercial uses. It's more of those really small scale commercial, local commercial uses, and not for the larger scale ones that are more highway dependent. So that's why there's two different zones. So out by the highway, it is zoned regional commercial, so you can do your larger commercial premises out there. And then the village core is just really where you want people to walk to. So if you're there at the Mount Uniacke Memorial Park, you can walk over to the Guardian and grab a pop or something like that. So it's more of those small local commercial and residential uses rather than the large picture commercial uses.
And Mr. Chair, if I could add to that, first of all, I don't think we permit multi-unit in the Mount Uniacke regional commercial area. That's just Elmsdale. But Debbie's right. So the idea is that historic center of the community has a certain character, and that's what we want to try and preserve with these regulations. And the idea of extending commercial zoning all the way from there down to the interchange. I mean, one of the things we've heard in every plan review is communities don't want a Sackville Drive, and that's the kind of effect you would get with a few kilometers of commercial zoning along a long stretch like that. So we think it's better to have, identify that core of your community and have certain regulations there, identify other areas that you want commercial or mixed use development, such as the interchange. And, if that area needs to expand, well, we can look at that in the future review for sure. But I guess, the plan right now would not suggest having commercial zoning along the entire stretch of number 1 there.
It's not the, like, okay, I probably exaggerate a lot with it, but right now, as of now, we don't have any place to put something like, if we want to put, somebody want to put senior complex, we don't have that zone like that. That's only village core zone that allow that. Or probably, I don't know if there's any commercial mixed residential on top that will, but we are growing very fast, and all our older people are moving away. We are losing a lot of residents because we don't have nothing for them. So I think we should be looking sooner than later before everybody moved out to have like, I know you tell me the RU zone, but the closest RU zone is way back East Uniacke or way back in Lakeland. Those seniors, they want be close to the action where they could go to the grocery store, they could go to the liquor store, they could go to anywhere, like to the restaurant. Like if you're talking about activity, I think where Eddie's is the biggest activity, and Councilor Perry can talk about that. So that area is probably more central, and it's close to everything. And I don't know, but I don't know how to do it, but I think we should be looking at something to be able to have some apartment, to have some options other than the RU zone for people to have multi-units.
And through you, Mr. Chair, just for information's sake, in the R1 and the R2 zone, you can apply for a development agreement for an institutional use, which would allow for a residential care facility. So you can do that through a development agreement in those areas. The biggest challenge with Mount Uniacke is the water and the sewer capacity and on-site sewer, because you have to be able to support those on-site, and it makes it a little bit more difficult. But in the, I think Rockwell Drive and that is zoned R2 or R1 or portion of it. So there's the potential to do a development agreement for a residential care facility there if there was ever a need. Also through site plan approval in the village core, you can do institutional uses for some things, and then other things you can do through a development agreement depending on what it is. I'd have to look it up for sure, but.
Yeah, that's a problem, exactly, because you need sewer and water, and most of the lot designated over there are like 15,000 square feet. You can barely put one unit on them. So that's the problem, where we have bigger land laying around that those lands should be able through a development agreement to put something, if they could supply, if you have 2.5 acre lot or 3 acre lot, and you could have with the septic system advanced now, you could afford to put 8 unit or 10 unit. But if you apply for RU zone, you're coming to a lot of controversy about putting a barn down there or putting something like that. So I don't know. We should have. I think we're growing fast. I think we're very attractive here to people, and we don't have any rental at all. You put your house, if you have 60 homes for rent now, you could rent them. And it's not affordable now to do a rental with the 1 unit, because if you build a house and you could sell it for 500, you're not going to rent it for 1,200. It's not It's not doable anymore. So I think we should be looking at something for our, like, to give more option for affordable homes here too. Thank you.
Okay, Counselor Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to echo Councillor Musa, I mean, there's been some developments like the one out in Kennecook with those apartment buildings were a great success, but they would not be allowed to be done in Mount Uniacke in the current areas that are there now. I've been approached by multiple people, and I've forwarded them on to talk about the institutional use is not what Councillor Musa is talking about. It's talking about people who want to downsize their home and stay in their own community. They want to rent an apartment, but they don't want to have the whole yard maintenance. So these people aren't people that need institutional care. They just want to be able to stay in their own community. And whether that's a small multi-unit on one property project or different things else. And there's been history where some of these have come forward and they've been denied, and the people who put them forward were really turned off, and that went through the community, that, you know, nobody is willing to listen and nobody's willing to do anything. And we got to change that. We have to, you know, we're looking for ways to develop and to keep people in our communities, to keep people in East Hants. There are East Hants residents that have been here 50, 70 years, and they're forced to move either to Sackville, Truro, or Elmsdale because it's the only place that there's rental units that they can go to. And Councillor Musa hit the nail on the head. You do not need the septic requirements, and the water requirements aren't what they once were with technology now. You can have those 4 to 8 units. So it's something that we should be actively looking at, because you want to build those communities and to keep that village core and to keep that feel of the community. You want to have those community members stay. So it's definitely something that I think needs to be looked at, because there are some areas, you know, Mount Uniacke is very diverse and spread out. You have the area that he mentioned around Eddie's, where you have our grocery store, our liquor store, one restaurant across the street, a computer repair shop. Then you go down the road closer to the business park, and you have the one pub in the town. You have another restaurant. You go to the other end, and then you have the SO and the fire hall and the post office. So everything in the community is already spread out. So there's really different nodes. So literally down by our business park, you really could put an apartment building in, because you have Withrow's Farm Market is right there. You have a restaurant just down the road. You have the pub, you have a gas station. So there are amenities and services close by. So looking at just one area of the village core and what can be put there, I think going forward, we're going to have to really look and have flexibility in certain areas, because there's some there that is zoned. Hold on, let me just move down here.
Through Mr. Chair, I do have my map up if you'd like me to stop sharing my presentation and bring up the map.
Go ahead.
It's you have different areas that are zoned like regional commercial, right? And different things like that. So I think, you know, we really have to look at ways to keep people and provide the opportunity for development for what our residents need. I know during this pandemic, a lot of people have moved out of towns and out of cities for open space, but there's a lot of people who want to remain outside, but they're forced in because there's no other options. And I believe it's our responsibility to make sure that we create the conditions for these developers to have these options available. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. Warden Rolston.
And I would just echo that as we move towards implementing zoning in the rural area, that has to be top of mind as well. Whatever we do there, you know, we've got to have the flexibility for developments like the one in Kennecook for folks that, you know, don't want to move to town. Thank you.
Warden, Councillor Head.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you,
to staff, how many of those zones, EV zones are there in East Hants? Just a basic number, VC zones.
How many village core zones? We have village core in Shubenacadie, Milford, Lance, Elmsdale, Enfield, and then Mount Uniacke. And they're the traditional community centers.
Right, yeah. So by changing this, that means every VC zone is going to be changed to these documentations as presented, right?
That's correct, yes.
Correct. And that's a problem though I've had ever since I became a counselor is that we put a zoning in and something may fit in one area, but it may not fit in another area. And by doing this right across the board, if we change that zoning, we change the zoning for everything. And it not always fits every area. And it just seems to me that we've got to look at each one separately. I mean, that's the way the agreements of bylaw, all that stuff is set up to, that's the way it's done. And I don't agree with that. I think that each one has to be looked at separately. And I think we have to have some kind of a bylaw in there or policy saying that you know, we can put this in this zoning and change this zoning, but we don't want to change the other zonings. And you know, as Councillor Moots has just said that, you know, the zoning down there, what's presented here may not fit in Mount Uniacke where the VC zone or the VC zone is. And I think that's something we have to look at in our planning upgrade is to kind of separate these zonings. If we're going to make some changes, we shouldn't have to blanket them right across the municipality because what works in one area may not work in another area. So that's just my comments. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, could I jump in on that?
Go ahead, John.
So there's, I guess, a fine line. Like the more zones you have, the more complex a set of documents are and harder they're to administer. But you're right. I mean, there's some things that may not make sense in one community that do in another. And we have tailored the certain zones because of that. I used the example just a while ago of the regional commercial zone. There's a special requirement in there just for Elmsdale, even though there are other regional. So we can do that. So for example, if something comes up in the Mount Uniacke area that's not relevant elsewhere, you know, you can you can maintain the zoning with just an extra provision for that one community.
I may respond to that, Mr. Chair. We had something come up in Elmsdale here just a month or two ago, a piece of property in Elmsdale where they was going to put storage sheds in. There's already storage sheds in the property, but in order to allow that blanketed right across the municipality, so that zoning would have to change for all areas. And that was my understanding. Now, to me, that was a great fit for that area, but if it's zone change for everything else, it may not be a fit for something else. And that's what I'm saying. We have to look at these things individually and say, does this fit this area? And if it does, that's fine, but it may not fit another area. And that's the problem I foresee here is that when we change the zoning, we don't know what the future holds and we don't know what's going to come down the pipeline. So it could be a plus and it could be a negative. And I see it more being a negative than a plus, you know. So to me, that's something that has to come through this planning review, that we have to look at everything separately and make zoning changes for that area only, not for all of East Hants. Thank you.
Councillor Rhino.
Just a question through there, John, so what you're saying is we could put something in that just puts this to one certain area. If we don't like the change, if Councillor Musa doesn't like to change this to the village core, could he right now saying, all right, I'll make an amendment that does not apply to the village core in Mount Uniacke? Can he do that now?
So you, Mr. Chair, I'd just like to clarify that a lot of this is really housekeeping in nature, and I'd have to have a whole set of form-based code requirements. If you didn't want to approve some of it, like you'd have to select what you didn't want to be applicable to Mount Uniacke, because as I said, most of it is really has to do with housekeeping, like the time limits, some of the language that I have within my document, conversion of commercial buildings to single 2-unit buildings. It gets a little complicated if I'm pulling out just certain things for certain areas, because it's such a large report and this And this, I mean, I could do it, but for this one here, it's a little bit more difficult just because there's so many housekeeping amendments that you'd really have to tell me which one you didn't want to apply to the Mount Uniacke Village Core.
Okay, I guess my point is if these are housekeeping amendments, all right, fine. But if there was something, some specific thing that did not apply to, let's say, a Mount Uniacke that would apply to a quarter area VC, then they have that right to amend that. And then executive or council would vote on that amendment, correct?
Correct.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
through you, Mr. Chair, I mean, we would, if an idea was suggested, we would look to see, is it common to all 6 village cores, or is it unique? And if it was unique, and Mount Uniacke, of course, is unique because there are no municipal services there, you know, there's nothing stopping you from, again, having those extra provisions in a zone for one community.
Thank you. I hope that clarifies it for Mount Uniacke and stuff, or any other group that is a VC. Thank you.
All right. Seeing no one else, is somebody, Councillor Musa?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't want to offend anybody, but the way I feel, we're not being looked at a growing area. Like, I can count for you now, and John can say how many units we're having in Mount Uniacke without sewer, without water. If we had sewer and water on stretch of the highway, I guarantee you we could outpace the whole corridor area. And John can speak about that. In my district, I don't have nothing, not even a grocery store. I'm telling you, John can say there's more than 800 units coming in my district, and I could count them. And there's more that he doesn't know about, that I know about. So we should be looking at Mount Uniacke not as a rural area anymore. We need something here. We need to make change to keep the pace of the growing community. So I'd like staff to give more attention to the Mount Uniacke area, because the sooner the better. We need commercial. I think we need to grow the commercial in a community, in a municipality. Look at our business park. We cannot make land fast enough to sell. So we should be looking at Mount Uniacke as a growing area too, and we should give it more time and put probably, like, we should be looking at adding more apartment for people to move in. Given the option, because I know there's some, as my Councilor Perry has said, somebody applied for, I don't know how true it is, but I heard John that he was refused to put some, but because, I don't know, because probably the councilor didn't like it or something like that. But I think we should, I don't understand why the R2T could be allowed in Mount Uniacke if you can put sewer and water to supply it. I think that's one option. That's a great option to have. When we go back to the regional commercial, in Elmsdale, you're allowed to go 4-story above. Here, you're not allowed to put a house above your regional commercial. I don't think that's fair. I think we should be looked at different way, and I think we should encourage people to have commercial and something on the top of it, rental or homes or anything. I think it's time for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no one else, is anybody prepared to move the recommendation? Moved by Public Member Balcom. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Musa. Any more discussion? You're looking for the question?
Question.
Question's been called. Signify by raising your hand, saying aye. Keep your hands up, please. And the motion is passed unanimously. All right, next up, another hot topic, background paper on roosters. Something to crow about.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just to give you a little bit of context again, this report came about due to a complaint that was submitted to council in the fall of 2021 A plan update background report on roosters was presented to Planning Advisory Committee in February of 2022. And as a result, council directed staff to review the matter during the plan update. To notify residents that this will be undertaken. So that was part of the complaint. And then as a result of the February motion, it was directed that staff bring back a report to council with other alternatives considering the density and lot size, use of community standards bylaw or noise bylaw. And I should just say that the noise bylaw, the noise portion of the community standards bylaw is what regulates noise for the keeping of roosters. So in regards to council's motion, staff did contact the municipal solicitor to determine if bylaw P100 community standards, which as I says has the noise portion control for the municipality, could be used as an enforcement tool to stop the crowing of roosters. Essentially, it wouldn't work. If the municipality allows roosters in their land use bylaw, then crowing should be expected. Crowing is what roosters do naturally, and unlike a dog barking, a rooster cannot be trained not to crow and cannot easily be brought into the house or have other devices used to encourage them not to crow. Therefore, it would be near impossible for a bylaw enforcement officer to actually enforce noise bylaw for the crowing of a rooster. So if council wishes to eliminate the crowing of roosters, they have to amend the land use bylaw so that the use is no longer permitted. However, based on council's discussion at the February meeting, staff are proposing that lots that are 6,000 meters squared or less not be permitted to have a rooster, and that's approximately 1.5 acres. While any property that is larger than 6,000 meters squared may have a rooster, staff still feel that not permitting roosters in the growth management areas that have municipal services would be the most benefit to residents living in denser areas of the municipality. Although there are some lots in these areas that are over 6,000 meters squared, the corridor is changing quickly and the subdivision or development of larger service lots will continue to occur. Therefore, the keeping of roosters may not be appropriate due to noise they make and the inconvenience it causes neighboring residents. So right now, the way that our land use bylaw is written, it allows for roosters on R1 or R2 lots. So that means like people on Bone and Crescent where there's semis there, or Hemlock Drive and Elmwood subdivision, or the new Sam Crescent, they'd all be allowed to have a rooster in their backyard. If amendments are approved to restrict the keeping of roosters on certain properties, any property owner that already has a rooster may continue to keep a rooster. The keeping of a rooster becomes a legal non-conforming use. This means that even if the rooster dies, the property owner may replace the rooster as long as the keeping of rooster has not stopped for more than a 2-year period. So if every 5 months your rooster dies and you get another one, that's fine. You're not allowed to increase the number of roosters. And if you stop having that rooster for more than 2 years period, then you wouldn't be able to have it back again. If this becomes, if council moves forward with this. So chicken regulations in Halifax, I have the regulations there. I'm not going to go over all of them, but I just will note that roosters and other types of birds are not permitted in Halifax. Alternatives. So as an alternative, council may decide on one of the following options: not to permit roosters on any property in East Hants that is 6,000 meters squared or less in area, not to permit roosters in areas of the municipality that are serviced by municipal water and wastewater, maintain the current land use bylaw regulations. And just to note that planning staff have responded to council motion C-2259 and are proposing that roosters not be permitted on lots that are 6,000 meters squared or less in area in growth management areas where municipal services are provided. And again, the recommendation is to prohibit roosters on properties that are 6,000 meters or less in growth management areas where there's municipal services, and the recommended motion is below. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Debbie. Warden Rolston.
My apologies, but 6,000 square meters is ridiculous. That's an acre and a half. You're going to catch Councillor Knockwood's not here today. I know he was concerned about some properties in Shubenacadie that were large, that are on, like, you'd have had me if you'd have come up with something for density with a reasonable, I fully understand, you know, small lots, but an acre and a half, someone with an 1.5 acre size lot couldn't keep a rooster. And I think we've gone from the sublime to the ridiculous. I'm sorry. That's how I feel.
Through Mr. Chair, I just have to say that I did look at like Cody's Lane there in Elmsdale, and those are our large lot subdivision in there, although it's on municipal services. And we looked at whether their neighbors would be happy with them if they had roosters or not. So that was one of the measurements. And then the other one is we just looked at Halifax, and they seem to use 6,000 square feet as a kind of like a layer for adding more hens and stuff like that. So we're just trying to bring some alignment in there with the large lot subdivisions and that are existing there.
Well, I'm just going to say, I find that we don't care anymore whether the neighbors in subdivisions like apartment buildings looking down in their backyard or not. We don't care anymore if neighbors in subdivisions don't like their next door neighbor's zoning changed to something other than what it was. They just have to live with it because we don't care anymore. And yet to tell someone whose home is on 1.5 acres of land that they can't keep a rooster, when I know how far they are from their neighbors, because my lot's about 2 acres out here in the country. And no, you don't have me on this one. I just think we could do something better. I don't care what HRM does. We're not HRM. And much of East Hants sprang from rural background. And yes, you know, places where there are apartment buildings and those little 10.36 meter wide shoehorn lots, those folks shouldn't have roosters. But 1.5 acres? No. I'm sorry. That just simply is another way of saying that nobody in the serviced area can have a rooster. That's all it is skinning a cat in a different way.
Is there any other comments? Councillor Head.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't think there's anybody on council, or certainly myself, I don't want to ban roosters even from the serviced area. I think, and I guess we can't do it. It's one of those things that's a one-off, you know. I mean, I'm not aware of anybody having a problem in the serviced areas over roosters. And then this just come up in the last year or so, and it is a problem. I've, 4 residents from that area have contacted me and very disappointed that the municipality can't do anything. And it's because of our bylaws and stuff we have in place, and whether we can actually put bylaws in place. I don't think we can, is what the staff report says. And I think people have the right to have a rooster there. But when you have one rooster in the municipality of East Hants is causing a problem for the neighboring residents, we got to have something in place to deal with that. And as Debbie says, even though it's kind of grandfathered in, and the rooster dies, you can get another and put it in place. That's not acceptable to me. But if that's what it comes out to be, that has to be. And I agree with Eleanor, like, 1.5 acres, anything below that, well, that means that pretty well bans roosters from all the serviced areas in East Hants. And that's not what I want. And I don't think the residents that live around this rooster want that either. But as far as I know, this is the only problem that's come up here. And I think we have to go back to the solicitor and just say, what can we do? Is there anything we can do to come in with a bylaw to deal specifically with roosters or any other animal that causes a problem? We got to have some kind of a meat that we can work with to help these residents. And they're frustrated, for me to tell them that this, we've tried everything and there's nothing we can do. And it's great for us to sit back and say, oh, well, it's a rooster. But it can be annoying, and it might be annoying to some people, but it might not be to other people. But when you have 3 residents there that's all annoyed over it, and it's very frustrating knowing that there's nothing we can do. And it just seems to me that, we're a body of policymakers here, and we're a body, we can make rules and decisions and stuff, and we certainly don't want to upset everybody else in the municipality. But I think if we can have something in our toolbox, we can handle these one-off situations like this. And I know, Debbie, you might want to respond to this, but that's it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Debbie.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I did contact the municipal solicitor, and he said that there'd be that basically it would be extremely difficult to prove that the rooster was causing a noise if we allow for that use to occur in that area. Again, it hasn't been tested in court, and couldn't find anything related to a court decision where a rooster conducting noise had been tested in court, and that would be the ultimate test if we wanted to bring something to court. But essentially, if you're allowing for a rooster, then you have to accept the fact that there's going to be crowing of that rooster occur. As I said, it's not like a dog that can be trained not to crow, or they have non-barking collars or sprays, and a rooster naturally crows. And to ask a bylaw enforcement officer to issue a ticket because the rooster's crowing for a use that we allow is very difficult.
Thank you, Debbie. Councillor Rhino.
Well, I'd be kind of safe in saying then this recommended motion ruffles the warden's feathers. So I would say, yeah, that's probably a good synopsis of that. But, you know, I can see both sides in this because, you know, we got people that work shift work. For instance, my wife works shift work. She's a nurse and works shift work. She comes home, you know, early in the morning, expects to sleep, and you know, God help if that rooster, if it ever woke her up, you know, sort of thing. And rightly so. So, but again, I can see the rights of everybody, you know, trying to have that rooster. I don't have the answer for this, and I really, you know, I kind of feel sorry for staff and trying to come up with something here because it's going to be hard to please everyone on this one.
Mr. Chair, if I could, so again, we've looked at this a number of different ways. We think this is the best approach to tie it to the area of land. And if you think that's too high, then, you know, my suggestion would be either you send us back to come up with a lower number or give us some guidance. You know, do you think an acre is too large or small? Is half an acre? I mean, obviously, the smaller you get, the more people that are going to get impacted, because there are surprisingly a large number of lots over an acre in the corridor. You know, some of these legacy lots where there was maybe a farm at one time or just a rural residence. So, you know, we were trying to strike a balance there between allowing the much larger ones to still have roosters while restricting it in the built up areas.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Go ahead.
Through you to John. John, have we maybe we have done this and I just can't remember it. Have we looked at Cumberland, or not Cumberland, Colchester, West Hants, or any bordering other than HRM municipalities for regulations that may be dealing with this issue?
I'll throw that to Debbie.
Through Mr. Chair, I believe that we looked at it when we initially talked about poultry, but not for the new subject. I just went to Halifax and looked at their regulations.
Oh, like I'd like to see how, you know, just other than Halifax, because I don't think, you know, shoehorning us with Halifax all the time is not a great idea. I'd like to see a variety of, you know, if we're trying to get this so perfectly right, I think is we should really know what other municipalities are dealing with, look at them, and then possibly come up with something similar or a change in something like that. That's what I'd be interested in. Thank you.
Warden Rolston.
Well, I think it has to be smaller than 6,000 square meters, considerably smaller. And yeah, I don't pretend to know the answer either, but as Councillor Hebb said, this is one particular group of neighbors who has had one problem. And I don't think the answer is to ban roosters in the entire corridor area of the municipality and some outlying areas. So yeah, I agree with Councillor Rhino. Let's have a look and see. You know, I think some ban roosters entirely.
Yes.
I don't support that because I'm part of a 4-H family. Was a 4-H leader. My son came up through 4-H, and we had, even in the country, a number of kids who could take a livestock project if they took chicken, because they could do that. The animals were provided. It didn't take a lot of room, not expensive to raise. And that's an option, you know, in some of these areas where it's nice for kids to learn where their food comes from and whatnot. And to take that project, you need a trio, 2 hens and a rooster. So I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but you know, 6,000 square meters doesn't do it. I don't know how small you go. I mean, obviously, those small lots that were suggested today, not a great place to have roosters, probably. Yeah, I don't know the answer, but this isn't it. Thank you.
To you, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to, I did have alternatives there. One of them was to maintain the current land use bylaw regulations. And one of the reasons why Halifax didn't allow for the roosters is because when they did research on the decibel levels of the roosters, they found that their crowing traveled quite far, and that's one of the reasons why they didn't have it. I could look up and find the exact levels. I think they do have it written down in one of their former staff reports about what the crowing of a rooster was, but it had to do with the decibel levels and the traveling sound.
All right, seeing no one else, what are your wishes?
There were a couple of people with their hands up, Mr.
Okay,
Chair.
Sam, I see you. Go ahead.
Yes, I don't know much about roosters, and perhaps Warden Ralston may know more about this than I do, but would it not be possible to have some kind of bylaw where they have to remain in their chicken coop or something up until 8 a.m. in the morning? Something like that to deafen a little bit of the crowing? Is that not a prudent solution?
Through you, Mr. Chair, again, it comes down to enforcement. If there's an enforcement issue, I'm not quite sure how we go out and make sure that the rooster's in its fines at 8 a.m. in the morning. John, I don't know if you can elaborate on that.
Well, it's one approach we could look into, I guess. I mean, yeah, anytime, the more complex a regulation, the harder it is to enforce. So if you have time limits, that adds a layer of complexity, but we could look at it. Or again, just my preference would be to just bring that. So under our current regulations, an R1 lot would be about 1/8 of an acre. I think that's too small, personally, but you know, where do you stop? Half acre, acre, obviously 1.5 acres sounds like that's too high.
Warden Ralston.
Well, I think Sam's suggestion has merit. I mean, yes, it adds complexities, but it's not like we have thousands of these to investigate every year. And we investigate now under our community standards bylaw when people complain about trucks starting too early in the morning and similar things to that. And this would be no harder to investigate than something like that. So anyway, I just throw that out there. And
Thank you, Warden. Councillor Garden Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Like, I suspect that there's probably more roosters out there than this one we're hearing about. You know, it seems to me that they're probably, you know, in Shubenacadie or somewhere in fairly residential areas. It would be, I feel like it would be kind of a shame to put something in place when there could be more roosters who aren't causing a problem in the areas that they're in, just because we've got this one problem. Now, in saying that, I do believe that when you've got 3 or 4 residents complaining about a rooster in an area, it is something that you know, that you have a responsibility to address. But as someone mentioned about a one-off, you know, if there was a way that we could address it as you know, each individual, and hope that no more issues come up. But, you know, I just hate to, as I'm looking at this and thinking, hate to putting restrictions on everybody because right now with just a one rooster issue. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Counselor Head.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To the public members, maybe they weren't aware of it. This is in a subdivision. The initial complaint come from a lady who works at home. Her office is at the back of the house, and I think it's about 22 or 24 feet away is the property line, and that's where the rooster is, and it crows constantly all day, never stops. And you're home trying to do some work. I can certainly imagine how annoying it must be. And that's just, like I say, as far as the timeline goes, that's when the problem is during the day. So if you had somebody that did work at nights and come home and trying to sleep with the same thing, it's I don't know. It would certainly be annoying. Thank you.
Counselor Musa.
Thank you. I have a question for everybody. Since we started here, I had 8 roosters crowing 20 feet away. Did anybody of you heard them? I'm serious. I had 8 roosters crowing all day. I could barely hear them here, but I don't think any of you heard them. And they're not even 20 feet away from where I am. So if you're working from home, you could close the window. I don't know. But if you want to have problem with your neighbor, nobody can stop you. Thank you.
Counselor. Well, the queue is clear again. What is your wishes? Or should we have another crow at it? Counselor Musa.
I would like to move not to permit roosters on any property in East Hants that is 2,000 meter or less in area.
So just to clarify, Mr. Chair, for those that are in the imperial system, that's about half an acre.
Half an acre.
Counselor Warden Rolston.
That's still pushing it for me, sorry.
Counselor Garden Cole.
And would that include the other restrictions that followed that as well, or just the 2,000? Like, is all you want to change about the recommended motion, the 6,000 down to the 2,000?
I'm giving it a try. I don't know. For me, it doesn't, but we got to come to something.
Counselor Rhino.
Would the 2,000 cover the minimum lot size in East Hants? John?
Well, the minimum lot size in the corridor is way less than that on most lots.
Okay, no, okay.
Yeah.
Counselor Tingley.
Would the 2,000 square meters resolve the problem that we have, the one problem we have?
This will not resolve it because they're grandfathered in. That
Okay.
rooster can still crow all day, and then you
Yeah.
can get another one that can crow all day.
But
Potentially
Mr.
for
Chair,
50 years.
it would stop any further roosters in that subdivision. I don't think any of those lots would be more than half an acre, so it would prevent any future occurrence.
But it's not going to resolve this problem.
Not this particular one, no. Yeah.
I'll second Eli's motion.
Warden Rolston to the motion.
Speaking against the motion, I still think it's using too big a hammer to pound in a small nail. I think half an acre is still a good size lot. And this, as Councillor Garden Cole said, this would probably affect a lot of folks who we've never heard tell of or heard from. And yeah, and I know those folks would be grandfathered in, but you get to that and people don't understand that. And how are you going to prove how long the rooster was dead before they got another one? And the majority of roosters, this must be a real different, because I've had roosters over the years and I've never had one that crows constantly all day. So perhaps, there must be some that do. And like I said, you keep them shut up in the coop, that deadens it a lot. And when they're outside and you're inside, there have been many, many times I've sat here in meetings and similar to Councillor Musa, I'm sure you've never heard my rooster. Do I hear him when I'm inside? Depends on what part of the house I'm in. So, yeah, no, I'm not going to support the motion because I think if we're going to go lot size, I think it has to be smaller. Maybe it has to be lot size plus something else. I don't know. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Warden. Councillor Rhino.
Yes, I'm not going to support the motion, and it's just the fact is not so much on lot size, it's just the fact it's not going to help out the problem that's at hand. This would only help anything further down the road, but it's not addressing the issue. And I think that's what they're missing. And this grandfathering, I don't always agree with grandfathering in here. Like I said, you get somebody that works shift work and you get a rooster growing, I think that's really unsightly. If it were to be kept inside or something that would muffle or take down the decibels, maybe I'd take that, but no, I'm not going to support this position. Not the way it's made.
Councillor Musa.
My intent of the motion, I thought it will please the warden, but if there's no appeal there, so I would like to withdraw it. So if you could guys, we could look at something different. If
The seconder agree to withdrawing that motion?
Yeah.
Yep, agreed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're back at square one again. Warden Rolston.
I move that staff review any regulation that other rural municipalities have in place, and that they do a review of average lot size within subdivisions in the growth management and serviced area of East Hants, and try to come up with a lot size that is perhaps more palatable than what have previously been discussed.
Do we have a
For the
seconder?
keeping of roosters.
Seconded by Councillor Eisner. Councillor Rhino to the motion.
Would that include, to the warden and the seconder, would that include any other alternatives that may, such as our public member brought up for consideration also?
I would be open to that and any other suggestion that staff might come across in their research.
Good.
All right. Seeing no one else looking to crow, I'll be looking for the question. Question's been called. We'll go to the vote. Signify by raising your hand. Keep your hands up, please. All in favor? 5, 6, 7, 8, 10. 12. The motion is passed unanimously. That was a plucky subject. Councillor Musa, I hope this isn't about roosters.
It's against roosters. Well, I'm very disappointed now because this roosters had come to our meeting for 8 times in the last 6 years. And myself and Councilor Perry have been asking for more serious stuff that we need in here, and it never came once. So I'm very disappointed, and I think we're tying staff up a lot. And I think there's more serious stuff that we should be talking about. And the multi-unit here, I've been talking about it for 6 years, never came once.
Point of order.
Oh, it's okay. I said what I said.
Point of order.
Point of order is taken.
Thank you.
All right, next on the agenda. The plan update background, mixed use center zone. John.
Okay, thank you again, Mr. Chair. So this report again is in relation to a motion passed by council to request a review of the multi-use zoning that was placed in District 1 in Enfield in 2016 as part of the current review that we're doing. So as a result, staff have conducted a review of the current mixed-use center MC designation and zone.
Huh.
We look at the current regulations, proposed development that we're aware of in the area, and also we take a quick look at the previous zoning that was in the area prior to the plan review. And staff are recommending that the current land use regulations in the area remain in place. So through the 2016 plan review, the area along Highway 2 from about Strides down to the Magnolia was identified as an appropriate area for medium density mixed use growth. The review was also seen as an opportunity to remove some zoning that we thought could cause incompatible land uses in the area. So this is the zoning map from 2016, excuse me. So as you can see, there was quite a mix from this is Strides here, and that's the Magnolia down there. There was some industrial commercial zoning, some general commercial, highway commercial, institutional R1 and R2. So quite a mix of land uses were in this area. And by this time, council had also already approved some multi-unit housing along Cadley Lane and Concord Way. So the area seemed to be in some transition. So that's really why we took a closer look at it in the 2016 review. That review culminated after, well, it was more than 2 years of work and more than 20 community meetings. There were 2 surveys and mail outs to every household in East Hants. So we think we were, made a good effort to reach everybody. And in the end, the result was the creation of the mixed use center designation and zone. And you can see council's, the policy for this area on the screen there, which is really to foster a consistent walkable medium scale growth pattern in Enfield's growing mixed use center. While commercial development is not required in the ground floor developments in this designation, developments which have commercial potential at grade, as well as dwellings, will be permitted to have an additional story. So we really try to encourage mixed use development instead of just standalone apartment buildings. In the past, council has permitted a number of developments in the area by comprehensive development or development agreement. This policy aimed to bring predictability and enact urban design requirements to enable a walkable, human-scaled mixed-use main street. So the regulations in the land use bylaw around the MC zone require everything to proceed by site plan approval. So, nothing is just by permit. The maximum height is 4 stories or 15 meters. And there's a lot more to that, actually. If you're abutting an R1 or R2 zone, the maximum height is 3 stories. And if you don't have a mixed use capable building that on the ground floor, then you're limited to 3 stories. And the maximum lot coverage is 50%. There are some other design controls. For example, the front of your building has to be stepped back from the street as you go higher. And then there are a number of things that are permitted by development agreements, such as drinking establishments, developments where you have more than the maximum number of primary buildings, drive-through restaurants, or institutional uses that don't meet the design requirements. And if you look, this is just from the land use bylaw showing the permitted land uses, and I won't go through it all, it's in the staff report, but it really demonstrates that there's a wide range of commercial and residential uses that are permitted in that zone. And almost all of them are permitted by site plan approval. That's the SP in the table, as opposed to a DA for development agreement. And so this map shows the pink area is area zoned mixed use center, which is the stretch along Highway 2. There's an additional little area up here in Elmsdale. That was really to accommodate something that one property owner wanted to do. It's really outside of the main area. And the blue shows all the existing commercial buildings, apartment buildings, and mixed use buildings. And then the yellow shows everything that we're aware of that's either got a building permit now or has site plan approval or is in the queue for site plan approval. And this is probably a better perspective on it, just to give you an idea of how the area is developing or proposed to. So again, the either 4 stories or 3 stories, you can kind of tell the difference between the stories and the general massing. I mean, obviously this doesn't show you the architectural style or roof and all that kind of stuff, but it just gives you an idea of how the development community, I think, really has embraced the concept and has proposed a number of developments along this stretch. So just to go quickly through some of those. So this is the site 428 Highway 2 in Enfield, where there was an excavation that had council concerned over the winter. And they're proposing 2 3-story buildings, 61 dwelling units in total. And then a little further, right next door, actually, 432 Highway 2 in Enfield, there's a 4-story building proposed with 40 dwelling units. And this is the Curly site. So now that their rezoning was turned down, they're proposing to do this as of right. And what they're proposing to do are 3 4-story buildings with 126 dwelling units. And then 485 Highway 2 in Enfield is just a 1-story commercial building, 557 square meters. 532 Highway 2, a 4-story building with 42 dwelling units. And then 553 Highway 2 in Elmsdale, they're proposing 2 buildings. One's a 4-story and one's a 3-story. One's mixed use. There's a little bit of commercial space in the smaller building, 225 square meters on the ground floor. And the other building is strictly residential with, in total, it's 58 dwelling units between both buildings. So the zoning in this area, we think, provides great certainty to the community and developers about what is permitted. And over time will enable a medium density walkable street to form along this portion of Highway 2. And staff are of the opinion that the provisions of the zone are working and will provide millions of dollars in investment in East Hants and provide much needed housing, while also enabling commercial development either in combination with residential development or standalone. Therefore, staff do not advise making any changes at this time. If council was inclined to change or remove the zoning, I think the issue would of what would take place would require much more detailed discussion, particularly so since so many land parcels have already sought development approval based on the current rules. And I think some of the other things we would have to consider is some of that previous zoning I don't think would be desirable now. For example, the industrial commercial zoning. So that's a quick rundown of the report. The zone lays out a clear vision for the area, which has been very popular with landowners and will provide investment housing and commercial space in a medium scale walkable street over the next few years. So the recommendation is that the existing extent and regulations of the mixed use center be maintained. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, John. Warden Rolston.
I'm going to take issue if you roll back one screen. And your comment, which has been very popular with landowners, I take a little issue with that because that's why we're here, because it hasn't been very popular with a lot of the landowners. It's been very popular with some of the bigger landowners and the developers, not so much with the folks who are living in this area already. So those are my comments.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I mean, everybody that owns property in the mixed use center, I don't think I've talked to anyone that wasn't happy with that zoning. There are certainly people that live in the subdivisions around that you know, we've heard from some of them for sure.
Councillor Garden Cole. You're muted, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. So I'm definitely speaking with residents who are in between, who are living in residential areas in between those buildups, who are devastated by what's going on. Maybe their comments aren't reaching you, or you're not seeing them on Facebook, or they're not reaching out to you. But I'm definitely hearing that. It's not just about the people who are in the subdivisions who are up behind it. It's about people who are in the residences. It's about residents who don't even live in that district, but who live in the community. And a community isn't just the street that you live on, it's the community as a whole. And so, yes, the developers want to do that. And you know, the people who sold a couple of properties to a developer and sold it for a big price, they were happy to do that. But for the people who are left, or the residents of Enfield in general, no, they're not happy with the way it's going. We requested this review in September. This was approved, and council didn't approve it lightly, this request. I realized that it wasn't a normal request to have zoning put in 2016 and then to be reviewing it. But we recognize that the MUC zoning, as it starts to unfold in front of our eyes, is maybe not the vision that we envisioned in 2016. I wasn't actually here then, but as it's unfolding, the residents are very unhappy about it. And a lot of the councillors have expressed their displeasure and concern about what this could look like 10 years down the road. As the warden said back a number of months ago, we don't always get it right. And it takes integrity to say that, and that, but to say that there's nothing we can do about it, I don't agree. I think that we can look at something and realize that maybe we didn't get it right, and we can do what we have to do, difficult though it might be, to try and take it and make it better, or to try and deal with what we have created actually. Yes, there are applications, but it would have to be actual how many actual applications do you have on the table, official turned in applications from the Magnolia to Strides?
Yeah, so everything you see in yellow is in process.
Okay, so we've got Catherine White's property, we've got the Tavern property, we've got the Burke property, which is actually, you know, not that extreme a development. And you've got one across from before Strides on the same side of the road, which I'm not actually familiar with that one. And you've got Scott Bloise's little thing going up by his business. And those are all ones that we are well aware of. But what I'm proposing is that for all the rest of that property, just look at that property in front of us, and then imagine further down to the Magnolia. Well, you can see the Magnolia there. Imagine it all building up like it is right there, those yellow buildings, both sides of the road, all the way from the beginning to end. Just imagine what that would look like. I mean, it's unthinkable. And maybe those are already in the process. And yes, we can't do anything about those, but I feel that we certainly can, that it would be the right thing to do to going forward, to keep it looking like that, keep it from looking like that all the way on both sides of the road. I'm not saying that there won't be any development there, but it won't be the kind of development that will be there if we keep it as the MUC zoning. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Rhino.
Yes, I guess we're too little too late, really. Well, from what I'm seeing with this map on the west side of number 2, but on that east side, there looks like a number of spots that could have the same thing. And along with Councillor Garden Cole, I think that, you know, people have in that area have said enough's enough. We don't anymore. So, you know, I think this is what should be reviewed. So that doesn't happen on that east side. The street business happen on the west side. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So John, if I may just have a little freedom here. If we change the zoning after these ones in yellow are built, would the developer be able to come and ask for a zoning change? And would not that be appealable where there's already the precedent of the other buildings there? Is that a possibility?
Well, through you, Mr. Chair, I mean, it depends on how you do it. So if you change the designation and zone to, let's say you put it to R1 or something, then that wouldn't be appealable because that's, you would have to change the designation. I don't know if you would want to go back to an R1 zone for all of that, but just as an example. So it really depends. If you leave a designation that would maybe open it up to a development agreement or a rezoning, then it would be appealable.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Musa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know which parcel was Councillor Garden Cole looking at. I'm just trying to figure out like which part of the.
I believe she is looking, all the buildings in yellow are what is on the table today.
The one not developed.
And the outlined in Go ahead, Counselor.
Sorry, if I can expand on this, Councillor Musa, to your far left is a development that is approved but hasn't been developed yet. It's the big open space with the fence around it in Enfield.
Okay.
Moving on to the next development, that's the proposed one at Curly's. The little one across the road is one that we approved, which will be a small commercial building. Further up, on that side of the road is one that's near Strides that I'm not familiar with. John, can you expand on that?
That is, I believe that's this one at 532 Highway 2 Enfield. So it's a 4-story, 42 unit.
And is that that's the first time, for some reason, that's new to me. Is that a new application?
I'm not sure how new it is. I just went and grabbed all the site plan approvals that were in the works. I don't think it's brand new. I think it's been here for a few months. I'm not sure exactly how long.
Okay, because I'm as you know, I'm very aware
Yeah.
with this zoning and whatnot, and that one is not ringing a bell to me at all. And then the one across from it is a what I would consider a moderate type development by Burke's, which they applied for a storage space back behind, but that was the front part of the proposal, which is just a 2-story apartment, a smaller 2-story apartment and commercial space, which is a moderate type development. But there is a lot of space there for potentially a lot more big 4-story or 5-story if made with concrete right of way as of right developments on that opposite side. And that would just be, I don't know, I just think that the residents would be very, very upset and disappointed to see that unfold. You know, that we already know how they feel about what is unfolding, and those 2 major developments that we're looking at to the left, they haven't even happened yet. And look at the pushback we've had from residents, and those ones haven't even materialized yet, but they are going to.
So yeah, I got you now. But if residents who live on the left side are complaining because they don't want to look, I don't think the river is going to complain about that big property. That's where we should be concentrating on building. Like, there's nobody living there, and that's a perfect place unless we are going to be against any development at all. I think that's the last one we should look at, because there's a river in the back and there's nobody living around it. So I don't understand why, like, residents, if the residents don't want any development at all, let's tell staff to go home and stop doing anything. Plus, those property were zoned, did you say they were zoned industrial?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So yes, the industrial commercial zoning was in the center here.
So that will allow junkyard. Do you want junkyard in there? Or do you want, like, we just refuse a storage building? So I don't understand what we're looking at here. So I don't know. I'm very confused. Thank you.
Councillor Garden Cole.
If I can just point out, the river is, this property that we're referring to is very far from the river. You've got the railroad tracks that are traveling way up very close to the highway. It's quite a narrow strip of property from the highway to the tracks. That's the property that we're referring to. All that property behind the tracks down to the river is not part of this discussion, or it's not developable. It would be floodlands, I'm assuming. It's from the tracks to the highway, which is quite a narrow strip, as you can see. And as I say, you know, residents and lots of council are looking at it and thinking, is this how we want it to develop going up through Enfield? It's going to encroach right down into the residences, people's single dwelling homes right down into the community. And, you know, Enfield already has a lot of apartments. I know that there's some areas in this municipality and districts who don't have a lot of apartments, who really want apartments. But for Enfield, we have a lot of apartments. We are bringing so many apartments to the table for residents to come to us. We shouldn't feel obligated to have to line the other side of the road with them as well.
So my other question, John, if we get rid of the MC zone, we have to give them their prior zone?
Well, no, you don't have to you can decide what that zoning would be. I mean, my own view is if it's not the mixed use center zone, I think something like a mixed use zone would be appropriate in this area. Certainly for where it widens out, I think this area would be appropriate. And, I guess, yeah, there's limited ability to develop down here now just because it is so narrow. But, it's conceivable somebody would be able to put a small mixed use building or a small apartment building on some of these lots.
But is it appealable if somebody had industrial zone before and we change it to MC, then we change it to R2?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no. If you change the designation and zone, that's not appealable. It has to be approved by the minister, so there's provincial review, but it's not appealable to the URB.
So you're gonna change the designation and the zone?
If that's what you want to do with this area.
Councillor Garden Cole.
Thank
I
you,
have
Mr.
yours.
Chair. Did, the MUC zoning, that was a brand new zoning in 2016, am I correct?
Correct.
And this is the only area in East Hants that is zoned MUC?
Yes, other than that little area up in Elmsdale that I pointed out, that was to deal with Sangster's issue. Yeah.
That's right. So was this a zoning that was created for this space that that a vision was created and the
Yes,
MUC zoning came out of that?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, out of those, we held a community visioning session in Enfield. We talked about this strip. And, again, when we reviewed it, we thought, yeah, the current zoning seemed a bit of a hodgepodge and thought it could use more focus for what the area was starting to develop in terms of the apartments on Concord and Cali. That would be a better use for this area than the, sort of mishmash of lower density commercial and so on that was there.
Well, I would venture to say that fast forward 7 years, and that maybe we need to come up with knowing what we know now and what we see and what we've heard from our residents, that we need to come up with another zoning that would maybe be more appropriate for what is left of that strip of the corridor. Thank you.
Warden Rolston.
Just wondering if something more palatable would be something that didn't permit these 3, 4, 5-story apartment buildings. If we had something like townhouses or something like that, residential, but not multi-story apartment buildings. And I don't know, I just, perhaps Councillor Garden Cole would have some idea that if that was filled in, even at R2T, which, what is the maximum height of those?
I'm not sure. I'd have to look it up. I think it's, but generally it's 2 stories. I don't know. Effectively, it's 2 stories because
I mean,
of
8
what you're
units,
permitted.
I think was
Yeah.
the maximum there.
Yeah.
But if you had something like that to fill that in there, I don't get the idea that that would be nearly as offensive to people as multi-story apartment buildings.
Councillor Garden Cole.
Okay, I just wanted to respond to that. And I totally agree. As these residents have said, they realize that development is going to go on, and myself included. I know it seems like it's just that I feel like there needs to be a balance with these developments that are being proposed, especially when they are in the middle of subdivisions or right in the middle of our communities, and that there needs to be a better balance and not so much dramatic change in the development that's around it versus the new development. And yes, something like the warden just mentioned would be acceptable if we could come up with what would be okay and try and please everyone. And developers will develop, but they will develop whatever we will allow them to, and they would develop there. They just might not develop what is allowed there right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One observation I have is people are talking about R2T and all this stuff, but the whole reason for that zoning was to spur economic development of commercial businesses and things in that area, because I'm not talking about the residential side, about the apartment buildings. I'm just saying that is the corridor of commerce for this area. All these buildings that are going up are required to have commercial spaces in the bottom. This is where you're going to get your professional services to service the residents in this area. I don't know what the answer is, but I don't think the idea of this zoning, and John, you can correct me if I'm wrong, was to have it be for residential building. It was to build the commerce and the professional services and the commercial aspect along the number 2 going forward.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I mean, the original concept was to create a main street. So higher density than you get, once you get off the main street, and mixed use. So yeah, so definitely try to encourage the commercial development in addition to the residential.
So yeah, so like for me, I look at it as, we should be whatever it moves to, if it moves to anything, that'll be the will of council, but we should maintain that, because if you look at the density and the people that are coming, they're going to require more services. They're going to have an expectation of things. People are going to want a hospital. People are going to want improved service, improved amenities. They don't come without density. So we really have to look at balancing that. And we hear loud and clear that the people in the existing subdivisions are unhappy, and we get that. I really think we also have to look at moving forward what is best for everybody, including those residents. We can't ignore what they said, but we have to look at what the intent was and what the market is saying too. It's complex.
Councillor Garden Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree, Councillor Perry. It is very complex. But it isn't just about people in subdivisions and what they want. It's about the people who have lived in the community before the subdivisions ever even came. And I always say that we talk about who's going to come, and they're going to want this, and they're going to want transit, and they're going to want hospitals, all these people who are going to come, if we build it, they will come. But you know what? My first priority is actually the residents that are already here and the residents that we have. And yes, development's going to happen. And as I said, I don't know that any community in East Hants has as many apartment buildings and has developed like Enfield has. So we've certainly done our share of that so far. But yeah, I am concerned about the residents we have, and not just the ones who are in subdivisions. And as far as what could be in this zone, sure, it could be some commercial with residents on, with residential on top, but it's the 4-story buildings that people are opposed to. And, 2-story is what could be there, and commercial and residential. Yeah, sounds good. But it's the 4-story, you allow them 4 and they want 6. And that's how we've got to the situation that we're in right now. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, nobody's in the queue. What are your wishes here, folks? Warden Rolston.
I would move that staff review the zoning in these areas as outlined on the map to see what a type of zone could look like that would encourage residential and some small scale commercial, as has been discussed today.
I have a mover, do I have a seconder? Second on that, Councillor Garden Cole?
I just want to comment on it. Yeah.
Okay, well, there's no motion, so the floor is yours.
Okay, so my concern is that it's been 7 months since this was, since a motion was made. And according to staff, during that time, anything that it was applied for is through, or if they so choose, that we couldn't restrict it in any way. So now that we've got this far, if we're proposing for another review to what we might end up coming up with, I'm concerned about any applications that would come further to what's already proposed. Is there any way that we can restrict that from here, recognizing that we may be changing this zoning?
For you, Mr. Chair, no. until you give first reading to something else, we have to process any applications based on the current regulations. Having said that, the motion, as I understand it, would be, it sounds to me like it's still the mixed use center zone, but maybe with lower density, lower height, maybe lower square footages. I don't, it won't take us 7 months to come back with that.
Okay, I'll second that motion.
The motion's been seconded. Councillor Rhino, you were on before? No?
Just gonna second the motion.
Okay, thank you. All right, seeing no one else, be looking for the question.
Question.
Question's been called. Go to the vote. Please signify by raising your hand. Keep your hands up. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. The motion has passed. Do I have the nays? Councillor Musa and Councillor Perry voting nay. Yes, Councillor.
Just one quick question there, John. There's no way that we can put some proviso on that no 4-story buildings until we make this rule change. That seems odd. We can't do that.
No, Mr. Chair, when regulations are in place, they're in place until you propose a change.
So nobody in Nova Scotia has done like what I just suggested?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the minister can, but the minister will only do that if he thinks a municipality is not complying with the provincial statement of interest.
All right, if we can't, we can't.
You, Warden Ralston.
I find that challenging too, that we couldn't put a moratorium on further development for a particular period of time. I'm sure other units have done that.
Well, I can look, I did look when this first came up. I can look again to make sure there's no other tool that we can find, but I'll look.
Okay. That concludes the business of PAC. I'd be looking for a motion to adjourn to Parks, Rec and Culture.
So
Moved by Deputy Warden Mitchell and seconded by Councillor Rhino. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. We stand adjourned and moving to Parks, Rec and Culture.
I'd like to call this meeting of Parks, Recreation and Culture to order. First order of business, approval of the minutes, March 22nd, 2022. What is your wish?
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Green, seconded by the warden. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Contrary of mine, motion is carried. First up would be item 42, tourism grants. Ms. Tapper, you be taking this one?
Yes, I will. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, can everyone, I think I'm frozen.
All we can see is a message that you've started screen sharing.
I'm frozen, so let me see if I can stop sharing. I don't even know if you can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Alana, can you hear us? I can, yeah, I can hear you. My screen, I can see my staff report. I'm sharing my screen, but I'm completely frozen and I can't do anything.
Maybe Shirley can bring it up for you.
I can't where she's stuck.
Oh, okay.
Did you want to remove me from the meeting and I'll just come back on? I'm scrolling. I have a scroll.
Now you're frozen.
Yeah, I think her connections. Let me see if I can.
I can hear words, but her lips aren't moving.
There, so she's removed from. Do you want to? I just wanted, in the interest of time, the municipal grant program policy. It could be deferred to May, or you could proceed with it now. while you wait for Alana to join back in. It's up to you
Well,
folks.
we have 2 in-camera items and a council meeting left. I would say if we could defer it to May, that would be my preference.
But we still have to do item 42.
Yes.
And it will be up to the rest of the executive if they want to defer that item 43 to another time.
I move we defer item 43 to May.
Seconded.
Moved by the warden, seconded by Councillor Garden Cole. Any comment or question?
Question.
All those in favor? Contrary of mine, motion is carried. Item 43 will be to put off, so if we can bring Ms. Tabor back up.
She hasn't joined. If you'd like to proceed, I could maybe take a crack at it. And then if she joins, she can take over for me if that's how you'd like to proceed.
As long as she won't become offended.
I can help too, Shirley. I
Yeah.
am familiar with this one.
Yeah, so Sue and I both are familiar with this, so we can hopefully get you through this. Let me just bring it up. So this is the tourism grant applications that have been received for the first intake. So there is a $40,000 budget. There were 4 groups that applied for a total of $27,000 this year. The applications were reviewed by the Staff Grant Review Committee, and the recommended funding is the $27,000. So you can see there, the 4 groups are familiar to councillors, I'm sure. We can scroll down here to take a little bit of a deeper dive. The tourism grant program does have a set of established criteria. So the applications were reviewed against the criteria. You can see there on the screen the criteria based on the policy. And the applications received from Chart Society was to repair a leak in their belfry and general building repairs. They've requested $4,000. The Grant Review Committee is recommending their $4,000. They are also applying for some external funding. So the recommendation, actually 3 of these applications also have some external funding applications out. So the recommendation that staff has put forward in this report is that the approval of the funding would be contingent on the decisions of that external funding. So we would not cut checks for these projects until we knew the results of those external funding applications. The East Hants Historical Society, again, they come back to us this year for some staffing support and for the insurance for 3 of their sites. And they've asked for $5,000. The recommended funding is $5,000. The Maitland District Development Association, again, that's for some funding for some staffing. They are looking at doing some workshops and live performances, advertising promotion, some cleaning, sanitation support for some of their supplies, and development and launch of an online store to help support that organization. They have requested 15. The staff recommendation is to support the full 15, and they've got an application out for $4,000 on some external funding. The Walton Area Development Association is looking for their staffing support for 9 weeks this year, and that's for $3,000. Staff's recommending the 3, and they have also an external funding request out. So there will be some money left in the pot. Sue can maybe talk about what was budgeted and what will be left. I believe it's 27,000.
So this was one of the areas where there was already a motion by council because we've gone over in this particular category 2 years in a row. So there was already a motion earlier in the year to increase the budget to 40,000. So there's a substantial amount there remaining. So in case something else comes up. And also we would propose when we do the year-end memo, if there's any surplus left over in this, that we carry it forward. There is a reserve for this. So if something came up the balance that was budgeted could go into reserve for future expenses, future grants. See, Councillor Green has his.
Is that all? Is that, yeah, I understand. I can see.
Sorry.
Is that all? Is all that all with regard to the presentation?
It is. If there's any questions, we will do our best to answer them.
All right, Councillor Green, he's up. You're unmuted there, Councillor Green.
I would move the recommended motion.
Do we have a seconder?
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Hibb. He had his hand up first. So it's moved and seconded. Comment or question on the motion?
Question.
Question has been called. We'll go to the vote. Signify by raising your hand and saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Contrary of mind. Motion is carried. So with the deferral of item 43, that I will entertain a motion for adjournment and to move into an in-camera session. Is that what we want to go to?
Yes.
So
So
moved.
are you taking that, Warden, before to move us in from that point?
Yes, an in-camera session for contractual issue and a land issue. Yes.
Okay. So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn with corporate services taking over.
So moved.
No.
Moved by Councillor Perry, seconded by Councillor Hibb. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Contrary of mind? Motion's carried. To you,
Go ahead,
Warden.
Warden.
Okay, I'll just wait until I'm not seeing that our recording and live is done yet, so we'll give staff some time to
Need a motion. I think the motion was just to adjourn, but do we need a motion to go in?
go in camera. Probably
Yes,
we do.
So moved.
Do we have a seconder?
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Hibb that we go in camera to discuss the contractual and land issues. All those in favor?
Aye.
Contrary? Motion has passed.